So that was probably the most significant fork in my, in my life, and where I've ended up and where I would have ended up. My father, who's a very senior officer in the Indian Army, so he was very disappointed when I said no.
Welcome to TTalks, where we dive into the stories behind the leaders shaping our world. I'm your host, TJ Walia. Our next guest is a technology leader, a product thinker, and an entrepreneur. He is a former corporate vice president of Microsoft, where he has held various roles in AI, communication, networking, including the Skype business. Gurdeep, welcome to TTalks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gurdeep, before we get into the conversation, I'd love for you to give us a quick introduction about who you are and your background, please.
Yeah. Well, I'm I guess, a technologist. I was very fortunate to find something that really was, very, very exciting to me personally, very early in my career, and was very fortunate to get some pretty incredible opportunities. I grew up in India, went to engineering school there, and then came for grad school to the US. And then after finishing grad school in computer science, I started at Microsoft. That was 34 years ago, and I retired a few months ago.
Wow. Congratulations on that. It's an incredible journey and a dream for many, right? A dream for many, especially seeing, how our community is in India as well, to say, hey, listen, I'm going to get my education, go abroad, get that dream job, and then be able to do that. And that too with an organization like Microsoft. So congratulations on that. That is absolutely incredible.
Well, thank you. I've been very, very fortunate.
Yeah. And so part of this journey, I'd love to, pick some areas to understand more for myself and for our listeners. And that first question I'll usually gravitate towards is that pivotal moment. We all have some sort of pivotal moment that we cross in our lives, or sometimes multiple times. Do you have one that you can reflect back on that says, you know what, that moment, if I made a different decision, maybe things would have been different? Do you have something you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first moment for me came in when I was 16 years old, and I was in high school in India, where I come from a family of army folks, Indian Army, and I took the exam to join the Indian Army as an officer, and I got in, and I was supposed to join about 4 weeks, and at that time I decided that I'm not going to do it. Because I was in 12th grade, and I figured that I should not pick too early, and I ought to give myself at least an opportunity to explore slightly wider. So that was a pretty important moment, and frankly, the whole family was ready for me to join the army. They were very excited. My father, who's a very senior officer in the Indian Army, was very excited. So he was very disappointed when I said, no, I want to finish my 12th grade. Maybe I'll look at some of my options. So that was probably the most significant fork in my, in my life, and where I've ended up and where I would have ended up. So that would be probably the most significant.
Wow. So walk me through that decision-making process, right? Because obviously you've got a lot of pressure. And when we look at from a cultural perspective, that, being Indian and being out of Indian backgrounds and families, and then on top of that, you have a layer of army discipline that's coming into the family, right? So walk me through what that decision-making was in terms of you standing up and saying, hey, this is what I want to do, or this isn't the right thing for me because of these. Help me understand what that conversation was at home.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was something really out of character, and probably out of really everything that was sort of expected of me and what I expected of myself, frankly. But what was going on at the same time was that I was in high school in Calcutta, and it was a very, very interesting open environment. And I was going to a very popular high school, from where students regularly came to the US to study, and some got scholarships to MIT and other schools to study. And so this was my peer group outside of my home and family. And as I was sort of interacting with them, I was realizing that the world is a really, really big place. And that sort of led me down the path of, am I choosing too early? And the reality was, it was too early. I was 16 years old, and I had no clue what I really wanted to do in my life. And my prefrontal cortex was obviously not very well developed either. So it was a one of those snap things, and I decided that I'm going to go. Uh, to say so. So I made a deal with my dad that I'm going to finish my 12th grade, and I'm going to take uh, exams to enter one of the colleges in India. And if I don't get into those colleges, I will also take the army entrance again. And if I don't, any of those charges don't work out, I will actually go to the army. So that was the deal he agreed to with me, and I did that. I took the entrance exams. I took the army exam again. I got into army again, and I got into an engineering college at the same time. So I took that path, and I was one of the
Amazing,
first paths for
amazing.
computer engineering. Yeah.
I love that. I love what you're saying, and being that self aware of this might not be the right path right now, or there's more to explore. Um, I'd love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on, and if you have any learnings from this, of what is that right time, especially for some of their young listeners that are listening in as well. What is that right time to say, you know what, maybe this is the decision I have to go in with, or you know what, I've got the flexibility to change as I go along. What does that look like for you and from your perspective?
Well, I think there is a very important lesson here, and I think that lesson is something that I have used again and again in my life, which is that you are ultimately accountable for the choices you make. So that means that you have to make these choices intentionally. That means you have to put in the work of figuring out what you really want to do and what you don't want to do. And then you have to have the courage of following through with that, because you are ultimately accountable. I cannot, you know, say, oh, well, the man made me do it. Right. I mean, that is not how you are going to live your life. Certainly, maybe as a child that works, but when you're an adult, you really have to find. And I've done that again and again. I've made choices in my career at Microsoft where my peers were looking at me and saying, what is wrong with you, man? Are you okay? Like, why are you making these choices? And and I made those choices because that was the right thing for me to do. And I was not going to live by some definition of the successful executive career written by somebody. I was going to live by what I can sort of go to sleep with at night, and with the choices that I've made. So I think this, being intentional, and being in charge of your sort of career, given all the choices that are presented to you, and sometimes they're great choices, sometimes they are not great choices, but you have to really step up and be accountable. So it was probably the first time I had done that, at that age, but I continue to do that.
That's incredible, and it takes me back to the point you're making about you have to sleep at night. And I remember early in my career, I won't name the company, but I was in a position where I was managing a few team members, and our executive team did not like that particular team lead that I used to have, so they told me to terminate him. I was going to terminate him based on the right conditions and because of the work that was happening, feedback, etc. However, they made a decision which to me was not ethical. And they said, we're not going to terminate him, but we're going to demote him so that he doesn't, so there's no payout required for this individual. And he'll kind of get up and leave on his own. That day, Gurdeep, I actually, instead of terminating the person, wrote my own resignation letter. And I resigned and said, I am not going to sleep well after this. So this is not a decision I'm going to make. But instead, I left that job and went on to obviously find other work. It took me several months to do so, but it was a decision that my parents at home and said, "What are you doing? Like, why are you picking this fight for someone else?" That, listen, I can't sleep at night with this. It's my fight,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what you just kind of said. It's like if it's you have to be accountable for your actions. No one
Yeah.
else is gonna make you do things.
And that authenticity is so important. We talk about diversity, and I think diversity is in many, many forms. I think it's the diversity of every person's self and authenticity is also very important. I think that is the culture of any system or any entity is not defined by homogenization of a particular point of view that everybody sort of falls in line with. Maybe that works in the army, okay? I mean, but they have a very specific purpose where, um, the stakes are sort of very, very different. But it does not work in certainly in I think the workplace of today, or any other entity, be an education institution, etc. So I think that authenticity is very important, and it's the collection of all these different things that makes the world tick, frankly.
Yeah, and I think to your point about it working in the army, but even then, it's situational. When it's high stakes situation, it works then, absolutely. But throughout, it's not like everything's authoritative. They're actually taking input responses and collaborating. There's all of that's happening, but it's only at game time that it's like, hey, listen, this is how we're going, and everyone falls into that role and understands that, right? So
That's what I meant. That's absolutely
yeah.
what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's awesome. That's incredible. So I want to switch into, we're talking about the work, we're talking about the busy, or the decision making, work-life balance, right? So the careers that we've had and the paths that we've been on have been very demanding. They're not easy to come by. So it's a lot of work that goes into things, a lot of decision making. Again, like you said, some are great decisions, some are not so great decisions. But all of that takes a toll on us. But it also has an impact on how much we work and how we work. So, from a work-life balance perspective, what are your thoughts on how you personally manage such demands, especially coming into a new nation, building your family, building the ecosystem, building all of that, and building your career at the same time? Just love to get your perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, the my own experience has been no different than that of an immigrant. A lot of folks like me have come, from India, other countries. They come to the US. It's not just about getting education. It is about getting a job. It is about getting your, the permission to live, stay, and live in the country. Um, so, it was certainly a very, I would say, a high stakes, sort of a place to be. And um, the first after I joined Microsoft, I think the first 10 years, it was completely, entirely dedicated to Microsoft. Like as a single, technical person going up, I would say very rapidly up the career chain. I was working 6 to 7 days a week. I would get into work by 10:30 and leave at 1 in the morning. I mean, this was my career. And of course, Microsoft was a very different place back then, and the technology industry was very different. And so much was happening, and not only we were driven in that way, but there was the opportunity was you had FOMO. You didn't want to miss out on this great stuff that is happening. And if you found that you're working on something slightly on the side, immediately you corrected and moved to the center of the action. And but it so that was sort of the first chapter, if you will. And I mean, I gave it everything I had, and which sort of set me on my career trajectory for sure. And I think if anything, that's the phase I probably have the least regret about. Yeah, I probably had, could have, if I had a little bit more time, I could have continued some of my hobbies. I could have maybe traveled more. But that was the piece I have least regrets about. The next phase was really, kids, getting married, having kids, and the kids were young, and so on and so forth. And that phase, it started off with, being tough, trying to balance things. And, when my second son was born, I was promoted to CVP. And and I was in a very communications business, right? I mean, I was this really hot, rapidly growing area with lots of attention inside the company, outside the company, and so that was tough. And then it got increasingly, it was the sort of the frog boiling, kept going up until I took over Skype and Link Skype for Business, what eventually became Teams, and started the Teams effort. And that was where I reached my breaking point. I was trying to straddle multiple continents. I was running the company, the entire business, which was about 3,000 people. It was, about 2.8 billion at the time, growing 30%. I mean, it was, and the expectations of trying to build a competitive for Slack, which is Teams, was all like going on at the same time. I totally burnt out. I was trying to do 2 weeks in UK, 2 weeks here, going back and forth, and I just burnt out. I had to take a month off to try to recover. I felt I was getting chronic fatigue, and I took a month off, and then um, about a year after that, um, I decided that that's when everybody said, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" I decided that I'm going to not run this crazy operation. I'm going to focus much more on creating new, looking at emergent technology, which happened to be emergent AI, and to look at creating new businesses, which did not have as much of an operational overhead, but it allowed me to still contribute to the company in important ways. So the other realization, which had also happened to me at the same time, which is more a personal thing, not so much of a work life or my family thing, was that I was also realizing that I like to think and I like to imagine new things and new areas and new places where the company can grow. And in some ways, that's what I had done quite successfully within the company. So I realized, like, when running these large businesses, I didn't even get 5% of my time to focus on that because I was focused with all the operational aspects, scorecards, reviews, people, competition, just rather than actually sort of the piece of creation, which I something that gives me a lot of juice, and I'm even doing that after leaving Microsoft. So that was probably the hardest, toughest time personally from a work life perspective, and also the time where again taking accountability. Like I couldn't say, hey, I somebody else is doing this to me.
Yeah.
There was a choice I could make. Yes, the choice had every choice has consequences, and that choice meant that I'm not going to be in an operating role. Subsequently, I was again offered operating roles after we said, okay, well, he needs some time. Let him work on this. Then we're going to pull him back. And I turned that down.
That's amazing. It's so bold of you to do that and recognize that. And that's something that not everyone can easily make that decision on. And going back to your experience with that burnout, and then taking that burnout as a sign and saying, listen, I can't continue to do it this way. But then to go up against everyone again and say, listen, this is not what I want to do. This is not what's right for me. This is not what's right for Gurdeep Pall. So having the courage to do that, because a lot of times we feel the pressure. And it's like, I have to own up and I have to do this, and because of these external factors. But the main aspect of it is our own health and well-being. And so I'm super, super thrilled to hear that you actually took that action, because a lot of the times we don't. We have all those pressures that just take us forward. So it takes a
The
lot of
systems are set up to keep you on the path,
courage.
and everything is set up. But again, that's what they're supposed to do. That doesn't
Yes.
mean that's what you're supposed to do. There are times when those things align, and that's wonderful. But eventually you have to sort of confront this. Otherwise, you'll be made to confront this. There will be things
Absolutely.
happening to you, and that's it's very hard. I mean, maybe I'm making it sound too simple that, oh, really, you just need to. But it's very, very hard in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so to your point of you're made to confront this, is what happened to me, right? In 2014, when I fainted at a customer meeting, like that was my threshold. I was burnt out. I kept on going until the body said we're done, right? So there is a point where everyone stops at. And once I recovered back from that, got back onto the right track. It took several years, because those kind of episodes leave a mark in your head and in how you operate on a day to day. I started approaching it again a couple of years ago, and when I started approaching it, I saw the signs this time. I said, "No, I'm backing out now, so that I don't get to that stage." And
Absolutely.
yeah, and you have to make those decisions
And
for
the other
yourself.
thing, really, what you have to watch out for is that, there is really nobody in the world who has your um, situation, exactly your situation. So it's not like, this, I hate this thing about role models and this, that, and the other. I mean, everybody is solving a different trade-off equation. And they are not you. They are not, and you are not them, right? I mean, and so if you start into the mode of, well, that person was somehow able to do it. Uh, well, I promise you that, maybe the choices that person, or the consequences they chose would maybe something you would not be happy with. So you have to really, sort of pull back and come back to that place of, comfort, and that this is really what it is.
Yeah, it's the common line we use in customer service is, put yourself in that person's shoes. And I was having a conversation with my daughter just yesterday. Actually, we were having a nice one-on-one conversation. We went to Starbucks, and I said to her, I said, listen, like, I know you're young, you're trying to learn all of this, you're trying to be like dad, and you're trying to aspire to do this. And I said, listen, one thing that I will never be able to do is to see the world from your lens. And the one thing you'll never be able to do is see the world from my lens. So you have to live your journey the way you live it. And you have to take those experiences and make those decisions on your own, right? And that's
Mhm.
essential.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, this is great. I'd love to keep delving into this topic, but from a timing perspective, I want to make sure we're mindful. The next area, Gurdeep, I want to jump into is mentorship. What are your thoughts? Because mentorship can be very transformative. It could help people. It can make or break people, right? It can get you opportunities that you might not even see or think about. What has mentorship? What kind of role has mentorship played in your journey?
Yeah, I have to say I was pretty skeptical of the value of mentorship, for quite a bit, long time in my career, and then I saw, um, not formally, but somewhat informally, I got into moments where I was mentored, and how helpful it was. Because, regardless of how self-aware you are, regardless of how much you think you know everything around you, there are always things. There's always new information, new wisdom, new perspectives that, that can help you. Um, the challenge is, how do you get to a place with your mentor where you're able to get to those things? Because a lot of times your conversation can be shallow, or conversation can be, like the mentor just talking off randomly about what they, you know, their view of the world, etc. But it's not what you need, right? So and then you may or may not have the courage to actually ask, or even, and so what I found is that it's a very valuable thing, immensely valuable. But you have to have that trust with the person, and somehow you have to get to that place with that person where, they are really invested in you, and you have the ability to really open up in the way, with them. And I think the value can really, really flow. I've been doing that a lot, yeah, since I've had that, I've, I think mentored quite a few people, and still continue to do that inside and outside Microsoft.
Yeah, I like that. You're talking about being able to tap into that knowledge. One, but that also means that you have to open yourself out there and put yourself out there. One, and open yourself up so you can build that two-way relationship. Right? We can't expect a mentor to just say, "Hey, give me a brain dump of everything you know," and if they don't understand what you're going through, your challenges, they can't relate to any of that. And mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be a one-on-one conversation. It can be a book, right? Your
Yeah,
mentor could be an author of a book that you're reading and you're walking through their journey and learning, especially if you're going through those challenges.
totally. And it's, I will say it's a little harder with the book, because the burden of actually trying to find the lesson that is pertinent to your particular situation is now completely on you. I think if you're working with a mentor, there's two people who are trying to solve the problem,
Right.
coming at it from two different ends. So yes, it is absolutely possible. And I would say that a lot of the sort of the mentorship in the book is actually serendipitous, and it is, more in terms of acquisition of wisdom, which then can be tapped upon later when different situations arrive. But in the moment, it's sometimes hard to do that with a book.
Absolutely. No, absolutely agree. It's more of a one way, but you're really pushing yourself in those thought processes versus someone who can correct and navigate and guide you through all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, then as you were speaking, it reminded me of something that Satya really believes in, which is be a learn it all, not a know it all, right? So that mentorship aspect is huge, where you're trying to absorb as much information in, learn, and then apply. And the application is a big component of it as well. So not just taking that input and then not doing anything with it, which a lot of times we do see as well, because sometimes that feedback can be taken in a negative manner or whatnot. Instead, take it as constructive, start applying those changes, and then following that path, and that eventually will lead you to the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, and the environment also. Like, I mean, this learn it all is like a whole. We can spend so much time on it because I've seen the culture of the company, through three different CEOs, and I
Yeah.
reported to two of them. I mean, I I can tell you yeah, that is a whole topic in itself. But the key thing there is that the environment there really has to support this idea too. If the expectation is that you have to be the know-it-all all the time because you're the leader, then
Yeah.
it'll prevent you from being a learn-it-all. That's seen as a weakness or a vulnerability, and so the culture has to support that. But that's a whole, I think, interesting topic in itself.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating, right? Because we hear it coming from the top down, but how do what happens with the people at the top? Like, how are they really managing that? So maybe we'll save that for another conversation for TTalks on that topic on itself. You talked about the 5% that you were talking about, where your innovation, the ideation that you love, but everything else, that 95% went into everything else. And that goes into productivity for me, right? Productivity is a big component. Staying on top of all of those things, getting things done. Is there a practice that you have, that you've lived by, that you found to be very, very remarkable in getting you out of situations where it's like, I need to get productive, I need to get my thinking hat on, let's go and get some things done, versus, what are your strategy there versus just, letting things go as they do?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that you have to create the headspace where you can do that kind of work. And so that means many realizations go into that. Like, that kind of work is important to me. It is a high priority for me. It is important to my success. It is important for my own growth and satisfaction. And once you have gotten to that point, then you explicitly make space for it. Bill Gates used to do his think weeks, and I remember we would all write papers and hope that they'll get selected for Bill Gates to read a think week. This is in the 90s. And it was a big event. And then he would pick some papers, and then because he would take the entire week, he would go to his place in Haute Canal here, and he would just day to night, he would just read and he would mark up, and then he would send his comments back. And that was his way of doing it. But 1 week in a year, I mean, just dedicating, I think it's a little difficult. I would say I don't think there is any job in the world where if you didn't take 1 day a week doing this, or to put it another way, if you can carve out 1 day a week, I think every job, regardless of what you do, I think will benefit from that. Now, obviously, if your job is to be operating the lever, you can't take a day off for that. Your manager will never allow that. You're measured by the number of times the lever gets pulled, and within some latency or whatever. But I think you have to be able to try and carve that kind of a time out, and that's been my best practice. Sometimes done as 2 half days in a week, sometimes a full day in a week, and it is like, especially like currently for the last 8 years have been AI with after the deep learning stuff has taken off. I mean, for me, the only way I can keep up is by reading papers, by writing my own code, because sometimes these things are so dense and esoteric that if you don't write your own code, you don't understand them. And then just reading the papers, which are very dense, reading literature, reading people's points of views about what is happening. So that is not only very satisfying to me, I think it is essential for my success. It's important for my growing, because if you're in the tech industry, you have to be relevant all the time. You cannot be, hey, I co-authored the first VPN in the world, so I can, I don't need to do anything else in my life. I mean, I need to be reminded that I did that. Like recently after 25-year anniversary of VPNs, some reporters reached out to me and said, "Oh shit, yeah, I remember doing that." But now, but that's means nothing now.
Right.
It's only what matters is, am I, whatever I'm focused on. It doesn't mean I have to be, everybody has to be focused on AI. But let's say you're looking at virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, whatever. Let's say those are things you're looking at. You're looking at crypto, or you're looking at programming languages and how they're evolving. You have to stay on top of it. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, so I love that. I love carving out that one day just for that strategic component. Like that's and even while I was at Microsoft, and we tried to do the meeting-free days, they very, very rarely worked. Right? You always have something that comes in. So having that environment, that culture, and just that barrier to build that environment for yourself is very important. And that comes back to in leadership and decision making, saying no sometimes. Say, listen, this is my day for this purpose. I'm not taking it. Let's move this on unless it's absolutely necessary and urgent.
Absolutely. My EA knew that only my boss and Satya could preempt that time.
Right.
So she would guard it, right? She would not let anybody get on there. So you have to put that in place.
Love that. Thank you very much for that, Gurdeep. All right, so now we're going to change things up a little bit. It's time for a rapid fire segment. So Gurdeep, the rules are very simple. I'll ask a question, and you have to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Yeah. Your favorite food?
That's a tough one, man. A mutton curry.
Mutton curry? Oh, wow. Okay. Your wake-up time?
6.
Okay. One gadget you can't live without?
My espresso machine.
Goes back to the first question with the coffee. Excellent. So given your tenure in communication side of the world, phone call or video call?
Video call.
Okay. Last thing you touch before going to bed?
Probably my phone.
Okay. One word that describes the future of AI?
All-encompassing.
Okay. If animals could talk, which would you want to chat with?
I would love to find out why they don't get distracted by all the material things around them.
Wow. Love that. Well, Gurdeep, thank you very much. That was it for the rapid fire question. I just want to thank you for taking the time, being here, helping our listeners understand your journey, and you taking the time to share all these insights with us. So thank you again, Gurdeep.
Thank you, TJ. All the best.
Thank you, Gurdeep, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to TTalks for more conversations with the leaders who are shaping our future. Until next time, keep on inspiring.